Hi, my name is Naima Yasin. Welcome to Copenhagen Fashion Week AW23 Talk Series. Today we are discussing how we can champion change for underrepresented voices. With me today I have Tonia Atieno, Fernando Torres, and Daniel Peters. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's start with how did you get started in your respective industry, and let's take it from there. Tonia, you want to start?
Yeah, so I started my modeling career I started out as a model. That was back in 2018. And from there, 2 years later, I've been working as a model for almost 3 years now. 2 years later, I decided to open my own agency and follow up with the journey toward that. So, yeah.
And what's the agency called?
My agency is called Foreign Rose, and it is representative of hair and makeup artists. And we have one photographer also. And our depth is in going into hair, specifically Afro hair that we specialize on, and makeup and skin, because those are kind of the conflicts that I've seen throughout my work, and I wanted to open up for that and make a change so that I can also continue working. So yeah.
Fernando?
Well, I started off as a stylist. I work as an art director now for Puma. But I grew up in Sweden, then moved to London, studied there, and then started working for ASOS. And then since then, I worked for various different companies. And now I'm here.
We're very happy to have you here.
Thank you.
Daniel?
Mine's kind of 17 years of a career, but it started at Burberry, kind of in head office when I was about 19-ish. And it was only supposed to last for 6 weeks as a job, but it really became the foundation of my career, kind of producing the runway shows, the global events, the global showrooms. But then I've moved through to the British Fashion Council and stuff like that in time, and now I've got my own diversity and inclusion consultancy called Fashion Minority Report.
Yes, and we'll get back to that.
Cool.
Because before we dish out all the solutions to the Danish and Scandinavian market today, I think it would be really interesting to see where did you get started, because Tonia, you mentioned like the struggles and the difficulties leading you into starting Foreign Rose was that you as a model actually struggled when getting ready for shows, that there wasn't qualified staff or going on.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. So I have been doing modeling for 2.5 years, and throughout a lot of my jobs, I found out that my hair was getting destroyed with products and that didn't fit my hair texture. And some seasons back through Fashion Week, my hair got steamed and it got burnt. So I ended up having some burnt marks on my head. Yeah, I had like patches. And after that, I kind of took a break because I was like, okay, I can't continue my work if my hair is not growing out the same way it normally does. The product's not being changed. Nothing is really changing behind the scenes. There's no one still to make my hair while I go for work. And I did a lot of my hair, like showing up to work, already had done my hair, so they just have to touch up, so it's easier for the process. I know you also want to look good, because that's your job, or your image of like selling yourself. So yeah, when that happened, I decided to take a break and kind of try to figure out how I could continue working. And I just started writing. I think it was kind of a diary that I started writing and analyzing some of my old artworks that I did in school, and that kind of shaped into my agency that I started from that, where I now have I have made it a must that every one of my artists have to be able to work with every texture and skin type, because I saw it lacking a lot in my job, and try to push for that, and hoping that will change. And if it doesn't, then I would maybe try to make my way otherwise. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
And
kind of how it started.
yeah, I think it's really interesting how you can go through being somebody at work and trying not to be the problem just by pointing out the lack of resources there is. It's one thing being a freelance doing it, but I imagine it's something else if the call is coming from within the house. Fernando, you're working right
Yeah.
now at Puma, but throughout your corporate life as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think in my experience, it's like especially when I started, like I was the only one in the room that was of another culture, and in that sense, in that moment, you feel quite responsible for like all cultures, and when you see something that isn't right or like, trying to explain to somebody why something is culturally sensitive, it is, quite daunting and it does feel a little bit lonely, but I think now it's getting better because usually like now I'm not the only person saying something or, or expecting or saying something to the makeup artist about, different like, skin tones or the hairstylist being able to work with textured hair. I think now when I do say that to colleagues, it's people understand that more in a completely different way. But I mean, we still have a long way to go. But I think if I compare stuff from 10 years ago when, a makeup artist could tell you that a black model looked shiny because that's her skin and, and that was it. You couldn't really say anything against that. I think now we've come a long way from that, but we still have a long way to go.
Yeah. And I think some of the change can be contributed to numbers and statistics, like what in the Fashion Minority Report actually helps. So it's not us going to work and having to argue about our feelings, but it can actually be measured and turn into something that is valuable, and people will believe in it more than they will take our words and feelings.
I mean, we shouldn't need to turn up to work to argue about our identity in the first place. Like, my identity should be welcomed, celebrated, all of ours, no matter what background that is, no matter the way that you speak, the way that you dress, no matter your skin tone or height or, proportions, we should all be welcomed. And I think it's fundamental that the industry looks at itself as it's been starting to do, but also in particular people in companies from different levels of seniority are creating and making space and fighting the case so that I don't have to turn up every day, unpack my suitcase full of problems and wait for somebody else to have to like try and fight for that change myself. It should be something that's fundamentally put into the foundations of a company and organization like ASOS, like Puma, like whoever it might be, so that I don't have to feel like I'm waving a flag every day because of the multiple layers of my identity.
But has there been anything in the latest issue that has been surprising, or that you're looking back and saying, why haven't we moved further, or is there anything that is surprising to you, or just basically as disappointment?
No, I think the thing is, it's kind of like I look at what happened in Rana Plaza 10 years ago, but we're still having to have those conversations about sustainability and circularity, and we're only kind of 2 and a bit years into this journey when it comes to really looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion. We hadn't looked at it on this level before, but because we were all at home, on social media, seeing what was happening, it meant that we were all able to kind of really look at instrumentally creating change, but looking at perhaps the disappointments, the fact that I'm still hearing ethnic minority people are having to fight to become more senior in a business to get the same level of pay as a white counterpart is a problem. Even though you're doing the same job, why is my pay different to yours? And people are having to go to different companies to get the change of title, to get more money, whereas actually we should have programs in place in companies to create that change. And I think it's also like, how are we talking to the next generation of fashion professionals, not just the people who want to be designers or stylists, but who can work in operations and logistics? How are we bringing them to the table? Because actually it's often our ethnic minority parents who are like, well, you've got to become a doctor, a scientist, a rocket ship builder or something. You can't go make pretty clothes. But actually there's so much strategic process in our industry, that actually we need to be looking at how we open up those kind of doors, and we've not been doing enough in that sense.
No. I think it's really interesting because, Fernando, you left Sweden to go to London. And if you look at some of the global issues, sometimes we can look at Scandinavia and think this is a very Scandinavian Nordic problem because it's a majority of white population. But I imagine if you go into specific as the creative industry and in the fashion world, there might be some of the same problems because it's built on the same systems or need the same change.
Yeah, I think for sure. I mean, in a way, I think in London maybe things have moved on slightly more than Scandinavia. I think Scandinavia's, I think the whole Black Lives Matter was at least eye-opening, I know, for a lot of people in Sweden that, considered, racism as something that didn't exist in Sweden. I think that opened a lot of people's eyes for that it actually still existed, and it was a reality for a lot of us, to be othered at your workplace. I think in London it's come to a part where maybe it's been performative in a way because it's like casting the diverse models, but maybe not having a diverse team making those decisions. And I think that's where we are now in a lot of places where a lot of companies are taking their time and like looking at their staff and seeing, okay, maybe we need more diversity here, to try to be able to communicate to people in like a more honest way. And I think that's at least where the company I work for is moving towards that. And or if you're gonna do a campaign that's involving people from a certain group, that maybe involve those people in the creation of the campaign. So yeah, I think we're moving in the right direction. I think it's just slow steps, I guess, in a way.
It is, and I think it's one thing that we are fed this idea that it's empowering just to look at somebody on a big scale as a model that looks like you, but it's more empowering to see the same people in the boardrooms and in the makeup room and in all sorts of stages of that process. And I think foreign roles might actually help to do that, because in Denmark we all hear, especially in Scandinavia, well, we want to hire more, but where are they? We don't know where they are. How did you find that process of actually gathering these people and showing the industry that they exist and they're really good at their jobs?
I mean, it started out for me as I used to do hair back when I was a kid, and when I came to Denmark, so that has always been part of me. And then I had a lot of friends who did hair, and that gave me an eye-opening when I encountered a lot of these problems. I would go home and be like, okay, what can I do? Can you help me with this? Like, can you braid my hair so it's done before the show for this, for example? And then it just kind of did it by itself. I feel like everything just naturally just opened up by itself. And I gathered, a lot of them are friends, so people who are close to me or people that I know close to other people. So it's friends of friends, family. It's a very family-based agency, I would say, because we all know each other, we all care for each other, because we want to see ourselves, people who look like us, but also because I think that our thoughts already diverse. We have a lot of different thoughts. So this should also be applied in the way we work and where we work. So that's how I kind of gathered my team, and it just came by itself, I think, for me, at least, and for my agency. So yeah, and
Thank you for the work.
Yeah,
that you're doing.
I mean, it happened by itself, and I didn't feel a bit. I wouldn't say, I know, maybe a bit sad that it had to happen, and happy at the same time, because now I've tried to push myself and my artists to work out here, but I'm kind of sad that it took so long, but it's still a progress in the industry. But yeah, I'm a bit sad that it took so long for people to like acknowledge, because a lot of people also throughout Black Lives Matter that you were saying are supportive. A lot of brands are supportive, and it's very much, I think, when you see that it's taking so long, that it's kind of performative, and that's what we want to cut down, that you actually do the work behind the scenes as well, and not only showcase that you support Black Lives Matter, for example, and not having a diverse amount of people working with you. So
I don't think that we've ever talked this much about diversity and inclusion before as we are doing right now. And I think a lot of us saw that change both on social media and on the front pages of fashion magazines, and in the increase on the runways, and the input of articles where people were actually questioning their own power position and what they can do. But can we maybe talk about what people are doing besides talking? Daniel?
How long have we got?
Yeah.
I guess, you know, it's been great to see a change on the runways, as you say, from proportions to, you know, it's not just one type of black or Asian, or one shade, sorry, I should say, you know, because often it would always be a particular shade of black or somebody, and that was all that was considered as palatable. But I think those have been great steps, but it needs to continue and progress outside of that. And I think, you know, what we see at Fashion Minority Report with our clients and within the industry in general is that there is an acceptance in understanding that we need to create the change that we want to see, and that actually we need to step away from performative allyship. But it's also a case of helping our teams to come at it from the same starting point. So if we can provide workshops and trainings, do it, but it can't just be the only thing that you do. And actually provide the right training that's going to help people to understand about the different problems that marginalized people face. And also it's kind of like, it can't just be about race, because I think that's the problem. We end up creating these silos when it comes to talking about diversity and inclusion, whereas we need to look at it holistically. You know, I think that disability is one of the biggest things that we really need to change on the face of it in our industry. You know, how often do we see people with disabilities in our fashion offices, let alone on the runways, whether that's somebody who's an amputee or somebody who's in a chair? But, you know, in the UK, a great deal of the population has disabilities, and not to just think about money, but there's big spending power there. You know, Tommy Hilfiger has their adaptive fashion range, but it's only kind of like a tenth of their business, if that. And then there's probably only a few other brands that are doing it. And it's just like, adaptive fashion doesn't just need to be for people with disabilities. We can all wear it. So actually, why isn't the industry championing change there? I think your question was actually like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
We're doing bits there then. I don't know. I feel like ultimately we're listening to our employees. Our employees aren't having to shout, or the actual industry isn't having to shout anymore, but we're being taken note of, and we're being understood as to the problems we faced and actually what we'd like to see changed. And slowly but surely, those things are trickling out of our boardrooms and onto paper and actually into reality.
And I think it's really interesting with the very narrow-minded view on diversity and inclusion, because there's very few people that are not an intersect of several things, both by gender and sexuality and ethnicity and going forward. So I think it's really interesting when you challenge that. People are like, let's take one thing at a time, because it's a lot to dive into. But I think the root of the same comes from the same position, whether it's racism for homophobia or going forward. I think it's interesting to see what we want to see of change. Fernando, what would you like to see of?
I think for me, it's all about, you know, what can I do in my little space? And, you know, I think a lot of small changes can bring about like a big wave of change, I think. So for me, I try to always like make sure that, you know, if I'm casting for a shoot, to have, you know, a diverse team that reflects, you know, what we're shooting, or if it's a cultural specific, like I try to work with people from that culture. Like we did a campaign last year that was in Ghana, and, you know, I've never been to Ghana. I have friends from Ghana, and, you know, people put me in contact with, you know, a local creative agencies. They helped us with the creative, and, you know, they casted the whole thing and they produced something really amazing. And I think I've never been so complimented for some work I did, because it really reflected that community, and it was all about, you know, the community around football. And I think that's how I can make the most, you know, important changes, like giving people opportunity, or working with an agency that, you know, is based in Ghana that maybe wouldn't have worked with such a big brand before. And I think that's, for me, the little changes I can do. And I hope that in turn inspires other people to do that, you know?
Yeah, and you can do that because you are in that position you are today. Actually, to use that power position that you have worked yourself to get into. And I think it's really interesting to also show that it's not a zero-sum game. That just because you make space for the diverse and the representation in it doesn't mean that you exclude other people. It just makes that product actually just becomes so much better because you're using people that are skilled and understand it, but they also give that psychological safe room to express those
Yeah.
opinions.
And I mean, a lot of what I do is, storytelling, for brands and campaigns. And I think there's a layer of authenticity that goes with it when you do really work with people from a specific community. And I think that goes for it. If you're doing like a pride campaign or whatever campaign, if you're targeting a certain culture or a certain minority, you need to do it in an honest, authentic way. And I think that's the real change I would want to see. So it's not, as we said, performative.
Yeah. You're nodding, Daniel?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I can keep on nodding, and I was about to clap, but I won't. Like, it's just like, have those people in the room who you're trying to get to buy your products. Like, don't just have us in for a one-time moment. Make sure it's continual. And it's just like, I say that one of the reasons why I launched FMR, or Fashion Minority Report, is because I think I've got what I call professional privilege, which is what I think you're saying, like you were exercising. It's like, I'm at a particular point in my career now. How can I use my industry knowledge, insight, professionalism to pay it forward for people who come from underrepresented communities? And I think we all have the ability to be change makers, even for the small amount that we think it is, actually, by looking inward and actually taking an opportunity to use that for somebody else, actually manages to create change in bigger ways than we can actually first think it will do. And I think that's really great that every little step that we take creates a bigger sea of change.
Yeah. And is foreign rose like one way to do it and show it? And I think sometimes when I say that I think it would be really good if we just started with ourselves and showed that we can do it in our own, I don't want to say exclusive spaces, but and then people will say, isn't it better that everyone was just mixed together and worked everywhere? So your artists, is the plan that they go and join the big room of other people, or would it be nice if there were several agencies with several different perspectives and did that make sense?
Yes, if I'm open for
Yeah.
to
Expand it, or is
expand.
the plan just to show it and say, then go ahead, children, go be grown into the big world?
I think we're expanding very, very slowly, and kind of taking in also people who are very authentic and original and very firm into their work as well as professional, because that's what we want to keep on delivering when we work with brands. I think we're doing it slowly and kind of taking it as a very family oriented perspective of work, and we search and work with brands that have and incorporate minorities, but also like storytelling. That's also something that we're very much into and like looking further into. Yeah, so I hope that it's gonna grow very slowly and hopefully more. Now we've done also a bit more internationally. So we hope that we can reach different people and places and different stories. So get to more family related stories, so we can include everyone. I feel like that's how it's gonna grow, like the society grows. I feel, and with the right people who mean the right things for themselves. Also, I think what you were mentioning earlier about it starts within. That's how I started my company. It was with how I thought I could change my situation at that point, and that's how I see it growing, basically. So yeah.
Nice.
I hope that answers your
It did.
question.
It did. It goes. I think it goes against capitalism,
Mm.
growing with values and storytelling and all of those things. But I think we do. We need that change, and I don't think that everything can keep expanding without something being broken somehow. So I think that change is. I think it's nice to see 3 people from within the industry actually trying to create change and using that power, not just by saying what's wrong, but showing some of the solutions that can be done. And it's nice to see that it doesn't have to be like burning down the whole system to start it up again, but you can do some of the changes. I think lastly, I don't know what time it is. Lastly, maybe you can give your views on what you hope this Fashion Week of 2023 will show, and what you're excited to see of change, and yeah, whatever you want to add on. Fernando?
I would say, like, I mean, Scandinavia, so, and especially like, this fashion week about being so sustainable, and like we've been really good and, world leading in a way for many brands, and that I feel like there's a big opportunity for Scandinavian brands to also be leading, and, diversity. I think there's a huge opportunity there, and it makes economic sense, it's, if you want to expand globally, that's what you have to do. So I would want to see more of that.
Yeah. Daniel?
I think for Scandinavian brands, it's one thing to have a really amazing fashion show that attracts the press and the buyers and so on, but actually, how are we connecting with people? I think it's really important for brands to be thinking with a people-first approach, from a customer demographic to the people that they employ, to the people that they can inspire to step into the industry. I think there's a responsibility there, and I hope that it's being taken on and shouldered in the right way. And, I'm looking forward to coming back and doing more work with brands out here. That's not me plugging, but the
Please
reality
plug
is,
away.
plug away.
Yeah.
But I think it's really important that Fashion Minority Report, as a company that's helmed by a Black LGBT plus man, is able to come back to this market and this region and do things with different brands and companies to create the change that we're all wanting but not exactly implementing.
Yeah. And do you see it as a struggle or a disadvantage point, that there's this idea that the Nordic countries is a very majority is white, so some of these conversations are really hard to actually pinpoint or show that it's actually showing. Like we see it on the runway, but then it's taken down several months after because it didn't make that much of a, I don't know,
Buzz.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of like not just looking at things as needing to be about buzz. Look at things about creating impact and change. Things aren't always going to be as commercially successful as we want them to be, regardless of whether or not we're trying to promote more or greater diversity and inclusion. Collections are not always going to sell. But I think it's more a case of doing things that are impactful, not just on your sales stream, but on people. And I think we're seeing it. But, I think for Scandinavian brands, it might be more difficult because actually there's not as diverse a population as we would like to see here, but actually invite people from different communities and markets such as ourselves here today. And actually this is great that this conversation's even happening. And that's why I thank Copenhagen Fashion Week for organizing a platform in a space like this, because hopefully other people see that there are opportunities to host and foster communities of our backgrounds.
Definitely. Tonia, what are you looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to, I think, making space for other people to be part of all of this. I think that the society looks just as different as this conversation that we're having right now. And I hope that brands are going to be working forward into inclusive of hair, and like having a team behind the scenes who are able to create stories with them. And because, the society is filled with a lot of beautiful people, a lot of beautiful young people from everywhere. And we see that. So we cannot exclude that. So it has to be applied on both sides, both ends. So I really hope for that to keep on moving forward. I know that we have always, and also been working with you through Eurowoman with Louis. So I really hope that kind of opens up for more people to also come in, so we can spread the word.
Yes, and the gospel. It was a beautiful cover, by the way, for the Euro Woman cover. It was nice to see so many different shapes and shades of blackness and being a woman. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yes, and thank you for tuning in. I hope you all have a great Fashion Week AW23.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having us.